And Jeff, and I was like, my radar went. So Chris, my dad, I know Chris is wonderful. I know him. So he because Chris also he got some idea. All the interviews on it just blew up.
Yep.
You know me. But they do gag.
So do you live in Colorado now?
Chris and I will. Big gag Chris. In Oregon. And they gag anybody in the complaint.
Since where the
They
beer
couldn't
comes
talk
from.
about it. You can't gag me. I wasn't calling it.
Report facts.
Yeah. So
Apple thing is a hot mess too.
but they settled there. They did very well. I can't tell you what they did. I don't know. But they all had to sign on for nobody. Yeah. And you can't bring your kid back, right? You can't put your legs back. You
can't replace your
child back.
Apply for the Kellogg grants.
Well, didn't that one family go
They need a
back?
bunch of crap. They put up a new website. You have to enter everything back to the website.
I don't think
No, for Charlotte, for
that,
the Alliance for Racial
the
Justice.
citizens
It's a 501.
so there's something called, it says, there was two
And,
tracks. There was a
and
nonprofit track.
Complicated.
Nonprofit. Water Watch and Public Service. How much no? They took on the nonprofit side.
They make it so hard. That's part of the problem.
I know the seminar you were doing.
Conservation and public. What night was that? You had a fertilizer or something. You apply that, in a way that crops and
But it's really complicated. You know, I have the patience of a TT fly, you know, I went through it.
But when you put on so much,
But if you don't do it, right, they
you still on the road. So
What's that?
that's what they went after them.
What?
And when they went
Oh, me, yeah, I'm fine, yeah. Oh, yeah.
going,
Wish I had 20 years ago. It's,
we were trying to.
any of them. Yeah.
You know why?
Linda's mother died, so she's been up in Pennsylvania a lot. She's the executor of the will, so
With
she's,
the nonprofits.
she sold her house in one day.
To where they
Her
have
car in one day, so that was,
okay,
yeah.
then they filed.
And she listed it, they offered her higher than the listing price. Because they didn't want to, yeah. The podcasting is funny, the behavior of a podcast they listen to,
Which is pretty big,
it's a different animal.
Millions. How do you, like, so you set them up. Google now there.
Yeah. Or I do a show, you know, just whatever. I like controversial
When you,
shows.
when you first get like something, I start Googling.
So I enjoy it. I get threatened.
Where their main office is, who the CEO is, who is the
Who's on their board?
Guy calls me up.
and you have,
Hi,
came
blah,
back
blah,
to
blah, and all
Arkansas,
this. I said,
you know, that
you don't
was
like it,
the
huh?
headquarters.
I hang up, he
And
calls
then
back.
at the
and he
same exact address.
You hung up on me. I
same
said,
exact
yeah, you listening?
CEO, was it not?
Don't, nobody does that to me. I am listening.
So now I have to take the money.
So do you want
All of the above. All
You
of
can
the
find
above.
$9.90
I
online.
just finished one,
It's
10
a mouthful.
That's sacrilegious as hell. You're gonna name it after
a
you.
family in Louis town.
Well, that's part of their creed. And now they're creed.
They have some weird
There's a
village
property
going in.
where the architectural.
I don't remember what it
Wouldn't
is,
let
but
you
yeah.
anything that keeps them from hurting people.
No, absolutely not.
It's rings,
Yeah.
raw chicken shit off
Yeah.
your cars when you drive them.
They were trying to redline them, getting them to sell.
I mean-
All the pictures on
That's probably trying to get that religious right,
lawyers.
you know.
They have like some weird religious.
It was a whole story. So I went through all the board of adjustments.
They have some.
Had to follow that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that was
But it doesn't include,
people latched onto the story.
that's what they pay people
And
$20 a
just settled it last week.
They use 3
And
or 10
we just did a town hall on it.
Oh, cool.
And they were all there. and
So,
they told the story.
You know how they talk about how much they care about their employees.
But-
they have
So the answer
COVID,
is
they
short
can
version
stay
is
home and
yes.
get like.
Oh, yeah, they
A lot of
advertise
your-
that they have in-house.
When they're temporary.
In-house help.
That's what, when they have.
Starting to syndicate.
Temporary employees for 14 years, that's what they'll have.
No health
They picked up,
benefits.
they
Yeah,
They have
vacation,
3
nothing.
temporary, 3 different ones.
don't get the story.
So what is it, just like management, upper level that are permanent employees or
No,
not?
they do have,
They have a couple,
they do
yeah.
have some. The majority of them.
It's called OT. But they like the story, they put it in syndicated.
Matter of fact, they
Send it to-
so it's like right on your plan.
Wow. So they're getting paid even less than they
Yeah.
would have.
Oh, no, no,
especially
wait.
if you know what
The
they're
temp
doing.
agency gets $10 per hour.
Yeah,
Cable
because
TV.
that's, they're
Cable
getting their
TV's
cut.
getting the punch.
Yeah.
We call it over-the-top television.
Rock.
Oh, when you have a smart TV, they have the free channel
And it's
Well, they'll pay to play, they'll pay for
Yeah.
content.
for your pocket.
The state of Maryland used to do that crap too.
And then they
They're
syndicated.
finally, I think, putting a stop to it, but yeah, they used to keep the temporary
They like
employees.
your work.
They would lay
they'll
people
come
off
back
in
and say,
November and
"Yeah,
December,
I'll sing about
so
it."
that they did, and then bring them back in January. But they,
Audio, they listen to, it's called podcasting.
like, and then you're gonna lay people off like during holiday season.
Video.
And that's kind of taking it, that's kind of taking advantage of minorities, maybe not English speaking people.
Because they think that's.
Because they could say, screw that, I can go work at McDonald's for $15 an hour. Why am I gonna lie paying chickens or sex chickens or whatever they do there? But they can't, because that's all they
Their
do.
wellness
It's a
center,
very emotional
they
issue.
use that
besides-
because then they have somebody in there that's.
I'm very big into too. so
Yeah.
I'm against anti-vax.
You don't have freedom of choice.
Right.
And
Or like
actually
that
got
doctor,
busted.
that doctor's not solving your issue. You're
He got busted a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Struck a nerve. I didn't realize it was that volatile.
He wasn't
Yeah.
even a doctor.
Like, yeah, yeah, I don't even think he was a certified nurse practitioner or nothing. He was like an old
They got
EMT,
busted
like,
for
yeah,
that.
just, literally
Well,
not
there's
an
a
actual,
whole
you know.
Joe, the ambulance driver.
You can't prescribe drugs,
future emerging.
so it's,
where
That's-
Yeah,
people
they go in there and
pick
tell
what
them
they
you're
wanna
fine, go
watch.
back to work, they're okay.
Yeah, so
Unlike
Tylenol,
free
that's
channels,
very
you
own.
know,
Charlie Spear in Georgia, he had.
you're in competition for
Plant workers, they all had MRSA.
in the foods of the world or, you
They all
know,
had MRSA, all.
they struggle
And you know, they did not go to the company wide.
for content.
They will
Would not
Um,
get paid
That's not on
for
already.
time off.
So there's a whole marketplace for content
But I
creators.
mean, this is, and people are like, oh, look how they take care of their employees. They have
So I do it. I start out doing
And
it as
I'm
a
like,
hobby.
oh
It's
my
not
God,
a business.
God, just don't get it.
you'll, now that like, you're gonna start seeing more and more of this, you're gonna be very hyper aware of all that. You're
Then
gonna
I
see all the
started
down air
realizing you can
billboards,
monetize.
you're gonna see, okay, we got
The
all
other way
the
to do it
colors
is
of the
monetize
people
it.
on the
Yeah,
billboard.
yeah.
Oh, and yeah, see, literally,
You wanna
you're gonna
watch
see
it.
it, and it's like, the whole, right now
so
with the
much
Del
if
Mar
you want to
Chicken
subscribe.
Association, they're doing all these little videos.
Yeah, I'll bring that along
How
slowly.
neat this family farm, and it's the
Charge
same
you much.
thing. We've been farming on this land no generation. No, this is a family.
Then you start
It's like
developing
it's
a
literally
plan.
the same
It's like
thing, and they force people to do these videos. They basically hold a cigarette lighter to a contract, and they're like, you're gonna do this.
If you want to sell your chickens, you're
I was in,
gonna.
Hey, give them back.
Yeah. Yep. Chicken.
They do, yeah, they do.
Yeah,
They go
well,
like
remember
DLC,
what
you
just
know what I mean,
happened, the Haitian
and then they
Community
hit them with, okay, it's
Association in
$10,000
Salisbury.
commercial.
Um,
And by the
was
way,
it was Mount Air,
free
right?
press, we have
Mount
to
Air
do
wrote the
No,
Purdue just wrote that
So-
Haitian Community
they
um,
don't mean. they come to
Association
me.
is also $10,000. It was only 10,000. But you
Yeah,
know
they're
why?
starting to-
Because Purdue has a contract with Bayern
And
Tempo for
when
20
the
years.
TV station said, no,
So
it
they're
has
like,
to be.
okay, well, we're not gonna help the
Okay,
Haitian
what's-
community in Seaford where we're gonna expose them to all the crap.
I think they're going back.
We're gonna go ahead and give them $10,000.
So,
Purdue's lining up for like, yeah, yeah, the back to school program is,
the actual shooting.
is it Mount Air Cares?
So
Yeah, they started that.
they got smart.
Yeah.
Convert 10,000 to air the commercial, right? But now we have to do the production and you're gonna pay us. And they charge a lot of. Michael does. I mean, that's free from.
Was looking back a couple years ago. Yeah, this was good. I can't even do this. I don't even remember how to do it.
I do understand that. People will say to me, how do you do that? And I go,
So it's like, you know,
I don't know.
like we do. At some
I sit
point,
down,
we're
I'll figure it out.
gonna
Can you
start
write it
handing
down
out
for me?
checks.
I
And
can't.
then they all started things like, oh, Purdue Cares, Mount Air Cares program.
I don't know how to
And then
describe it.
you got the PR people that are like, oh yeah, we're big stuff.
Because you say, well, what's off?
Celebrating
Which one of
you know,
This
what is it like?
Giant frying pan.
Yeah, giant, yeah, and then every,
It's funny.
literally, you can see it. I mean, Governor Westmore.
But you just get it like a rhythm.
Did a big thing, guess who all the sponsors were? Mount Air, Purdue,
Maylock.
Tennessee Utilities, there was a bunch of other ones in there, and it was like literally only one green energy.
So they're trying to buy him.
Yep. And I was like, and all these people came up with a big luncheon, talk about how wonderful it was, and they were all invited, and I was like, do you not see a problem with this? Big fat signs, here's all the people that donated money to have this luncheon.
Yeah. So most things are gonna be stupid.
Yeah.
Michael and I work together.
But yeah, Purdue, like I said,
Remember
my
little things
roommate
like-
is white.
Jack, I can't get the sound working. I'm putting.
Oh,
it in.
Purdue-
He died 3
Purdue
times
ruined
on
my
his
life.
way
How
up to
many
Chicago
rings is it?
because of Purdue.
It matters a lot.
Yeah.
Right? Remember, I said, you don't have the three.
RSF.
Remember that? He said, oh, this is how'd you know that? I made the same mistake.
And they're like, we're gonna find out what next
What he and I work
they
together.
fired me on union
Couple of
leave.
years, have a lot of-
Wow.
I do a lot of.
We need to take a PIC.
Put you in
Sales,
the studio.
Oh my God, don't talk to me in acronyms anymore, I can't
So,
stand
We're the
it.
RFP.
I'm done. No more RFPs, I'm dying, oh my God, someone asked me to management earlier today, and I was like,
By that color.
I'm like ready to
And, so when they do the weather before they do the show, they have a monitor. The idea is you should always be facing the screen. Good weather pressure, it's all green. If they have clear
There's
marks
a
and they have
little,
on the floor
as far
marks,
as the
they scan it, they do a little green.
IU.
Okay.
But it's
But with inflation going up like
But
it
it's all
is.
done, everything's
what
free.
he's doing is he's taking this advantage to take the
You walk into the
$70
studio,
last
and everybody
year.
says, "Where's the?"
They rent these
Demo
demo trailers.
It's like, well, I don't know if you watch cable news,
They
like
fix
that.
They're gonna price them out.
And
And then they take
the
that,
focus
they,
is
even though we had 2 warnings of
they're all
eviction.
virtual.
We had a vote. There was no law in Louisville.
All right, let me give you.
Let me get it.
I need cards.
And then
I don't
what
have
else?
them with me. I
And
got them,
also,
I
the
didn't get one.
answer is,
Let me get 'em.
for example,
I got one for
No,
parking.
no, no, no,
They
no,
do
no,
others.
don't do that.
I only have one parking space.
Yeah.
in Texas, where they're the anchor for Delaware, California.
Ryan and
And we
Rose said
own
it,
our
You know,
retaliation.
between 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock, till 5 o'clock, 5 show.
We have to see if it's
And that's your
That's
end.
not what they were.
So they do multitask.
There's no, you guys have no, there's no environmental nonprofit doing this work now.
They all got bought out.
As I did with you. You were in Colorado.
Yeah.
Well, when you were all in Kansas, and when you was in
Get all
Delaware Center for Innovation.
We were able to.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody told
I
us
can
to
manage everything.
and look.
If you remember,
And Harvard
first
has,
thing somebody says to
This is
me,
how we work.
"Oh, do I sign in?"
He went over
Ever since
and he looked at it and he planned.
I lived down
That's
there.
when we knew some problem.
Islands, if you remember, it's an
Okay, so
island.
you
they
live
probably would have
in,
nothing to do with it.
you live in East
And we
Eastern.
and we got a good result. We got
And I worked both areas. I worked Lower Shore, Maryland.
because we paid them 900
Yes.
And then
soil,
the
and then they told when we got the soil test.
Health and Environmental Network. That's Delaware.
What?
They're all
We
right.
sent it up to
Nobody
Carney.
crosses it.
We sent it up to Carney.
This is good. I came all the way from the other side of DC to meet you.
What's your name again? I gotta get it.
You don't know yet, so we can't tell you.
Yeah, Ray Whitford, you can look me up in.
It's gonna get this in the package.
I will. I got it now because you got my curiosity.
They refused to say if there was any conflict. And so
I can write down.
Here we go.
But if I had a trailer for 40 years, I would probably make the call.
Well, I feel honored.
If I like it. Because I get people that call me, and they want to do it, and then it's better. Because some of them are,
It went up to Jimmy, Carney.
I look at charity navigator, and
So, how do I go?
Yeah, very busy.
tell me about what you do, and then I figure out how many hours. And then I give you
I
a
know, and
card.
that's, I mean, now you have all the, environmental.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it.
I would say by the end of this month, I should have some kind of word of where this is going. It's mostly the city because the we concentrate around health and technology. So we utilize medical mobile units to reach out to the population. So that's part of it.
Hey,
That's part of it.
all right,
All right.
all right. Thank you.
Podcast is audio, and
And that's not stop him from giving the message. Because he is not that kind of guy. So we did an action at the University where they show you how to rip it off. We got shut down by the police, but we had like gowns on.
take
We
it
had
and I strip out the
certificates.
sound. So I just get the sound
We
and
found
I
out
upload it to
that
a
he
podcast.
got money out of Warren Buffett. And I know he will not be. He won't be. So what we did was, so they lied and said that the only trailers that ever are community
And then
is
we'll
our
strip it out.
But you know what? Buckets are we lied. They lied. That's how we got over it. It was something because our managers that says something we get. They sell small trailers. You go down 113. And they're telling us Louis that. Louis is like, yeah, you're right. And I said, the links to what the council said, this is pretty good, like, this ain't fit. And it was one, the census recognized as a 60-year-old property particular community. So pretty much destroys what we have. You know what said?
Yeah.
So it's a little crazy today.
Are you?
Kobe.
I don't know that we've ever met, but I've met your name so many times.
Yeah, my spouse used to work at Morehouse. Natasha Blakeney, back in the day. You may not have been there before.
There's so many
Mm-mm. I wasn't an EPA, but I was Alabama in undergrad. Then, oh, you know me from the Bosch, 2007 and 11.
Well, they're all lawyers.
Yeah, I went to grad school in North Carolina. Yeah, it was 98, 2005. Okay. Yeah, Industrial Hog Farms. Okay, let me see. So we're gonna get started, everybody. No, you don't need slides. This is a discussion. I got some questions. So you're fine. What's that? Oh, we're getting ready to get started. Oh, are you? What's your name? Martin. Oh, yes, you are. Come on up. Yeah, I'm sorry. I haven't met you yet. How you pronounce your last name? Martin. Ubaldo. Okay, sorry. No, you just got here?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I was like, who are you? That's too funny. Okay. Okay, give me another minute, family. We're gonna get us started. Hold on a second. I'm trying to get my slides right. And we're behind. It's the Elizabeth and Dr. McLean. It's our last day, so we're running a little bit behind today. But I like the cultural looks there. Nice, y'all. Y'all are ready. Looking good there. So I'm actually stalling for time, looking for my slides. So y'all give me another minute. Trying to find this document. So really excited to have everybody here in the room today. It's been great to have this symposium. And over the last 5 days, we've had some very important discussions. And we're going to close out the symposium with a discussion on moving from the conference of the parties to the conference of the people in the fight for climate justice. Y'all are very familiar with COP, and we wanted to have a conversation about a different kind of COP that really focused on the people, which connects to our theme of people, power, and politics. So running a little bit behind on time, so what I'm gonna do is just give a quick introduction. I'm gonna go into bios of our speakers for the day. So we have Dr. Mildred McLean, Executive Director and founder of Harambe House. We have Dr. Stephanie Miles Richardson, the Director of the Novartis Beacon of Hope Center of Excellence on Climate and Environmental Health at Morehouse School of Medicine. We also have Marinelle Ubaldo. Did I pronounce that? Ubaldo. Sorry about that. I probably messed it up again. Who's here, founder, Youth Leaders for Environmental Action Federation. And our last speaker of the day is Elizabeth Young-Pierre. And so this discussion is about this conference of the parties. And y'all know we've had these meetings recently in Egypt we had these meetings in far off lands about these global climate change issues and what we need to do about it. This discussion, we really want to ground it in the needs of how, if we had a conference of the people, how would it be different, right? How can we do this differently? And I know Dr. McLean can speak on those issues. She's been to the COP meetings several times. So, Dr. McLean, can you lead us out and talk about your experiences at the recent COP? What you've been doing as relates to the COP, and your thoughts about. This is first. I'm gonna give everybody a chance to talk about the experience at the COP. So can y'all kind of just dig into, and start with Dr. McLean first, your experiences with COP, what it means to the EJ and the climate justice movement, and we can go from there. Go ahead, Dr. McLean.
Wonderful. First of all, let me give thanks to the ancestors and the Creator for allowing us to be with each other as family once again to talk about issues that are so critical to the people on the ground, not the people on the hill. And so I'm excited to even try to attempt to answer this question. I've been dealing with the COP process since 2001. So that's 22 years of almost wasted time, but it's not really wasted time because I was able to meet a lot of people from a lot of places who had a lot of knowledge to share and had already begun to develop community-based solutions to all of the horrific things that we're facing on the ground. What would we need to do differently? The COP process is multifaceted. It has lots of pieces going on. You have the blue badges, the green badges, the brave beige badges, the no badges, the I want a badge, the other I can't get a badge. And so one of the things from Jump Street that I would do differently is not require a badge to get in. And I would not separate people according to government and the NGOs and the CBOs and the this O and that O. I would allow people to come. As a matter of fact, as a result of the COP process for COP 27, the Harambe House Citizens for Environmental Justice called for a people's COP, where the people could actually participate, where they can be engaged, where they can offer the community-based, community-driven, community-led solutions to the problems that we're facing, because a lot of that is already in our community. We just need to make sure that they come up with that $100 billion that they promised in terms of climate reparations. They need to come up off of that money and give it to the developing countries and the community-based organizations around the world to become more engaged in doing what needs to be done. I would include more young people in the process, but I would not continue to put resources into spaces that are not going to do us any good. After 22 years, the only thing I can point to other than building networks, collaborations, and partnerships with other like-minded organizations is that at one of the early COPs, we were able to get maybe a 3-worded phrase into the language around health. So we did have some input, but where did it go? What did it do? What impact? What's the effect? We can't see it as of yet. So there is a reason why we need to stay at that table, because we got to ensure that we can hold those international bodies accountable for the damage that has been done, and then accountable for all these great goals that have been set. But in terms of people, we need to mobilize the people to be engaged on the ground, as we do in the US through the EJ movement, the Climate J movement. We also have to begin to really focus more critically on what does it mean to develop power? How do we define power? What is the use of power when we still seem to be almost in the same space? I think that we're bringing people from the hood to the hill. So we're trying to deal with all these policies, but a policy is no good if it's not practiced, if it's not implementable, if we can't evaluate it in some way. There's supposed to be some way to measure what we do in the COP process. For example, in Paris in 2015, there was something developed called the stock take. So every 5 years, there was supposed to be an assessment of what progress has been made on the ground in terms of addressing climate impacts. It's supposed to start at COP26, and actually this year is supposed to end and an assessment be given. But we haven't heard anything about that. We haven't been involved. So the COP process itself seems to be, once again, very exclusionary, very racist. Did I say racist? Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. I don't know who's in the audience, but yes, very racist. And we've got to do something about that, because if we cannot have any power and influence in that process, we need to exercise Kujichagulia. And in our hood, Kujichagulia is self-determination. We need to engage in a new process, create a new process, so that we can actually advance what we're trying to do. We can actually implement more solutions on the ground, and we can require that those resources come to us to do it. So I hope I've given you a little snippet of what I'm thinking. I want to apologize a little bit, and I just want to update you for a second. I'm in Senegal. I'm in Dakar, Senegal. And today I went to Gorée Island, to the door of no return. And I'm looking at all these thousands and thousands of Senegalese people who are remembering their ancestors who left out of that door for no return. So it is our responsibility to create a door of return and to work to ensure that the same devastation that we are facing doesn't continue in developing countries like Senegal, that they're able to keep their oceans pristine. We're doing some port work here. And my God, the insult and the injury to the people in the name of development is just atrocious. So we have a great deal of work to do in terms of organizing Bootleg Preacher Wilson, a people's car,
yes,
where we can really, excuse me, yeah, you know you bootleg preacher, don't play, where we really organize and mobilize the people to use their power, to move our agenda.
Thank you, Dr. McLean. I'm gonna go to my good friend Elizabeth Young-Pierre next. And I don't know if I gave you a title, so I'll make sure I do that correctly, Elizabeth. Executive Director of Uprose, Brooklyn's oldest Latino community-based organization. Also co-chair of the Climate Justice Alliance. So Elizabeth, can you give your perspective about COP, your experiences with it, in the same vein of what Dr. McLean did? And what are the top COP priorities for you as a leader and advocate in the space, but also for your organization, the Climate Justice Alliance?
Well, Ashe mi gente, alafia to all of you. It is an honor to be in this space with you. On Thursday, Uprose is holding an event called Is the COP Complicit in the Climate Crisis? And the reason that we're holding that event is because we think it's time for that conversation to happen. The truth is that the COP marginalizes the power of the global majority. That's what it does. And we are complicit when we participate in a process that is corporate led and government compromised. And what I mean by that is, like last year, for example, I don't want to speak for the Climate Justice Alliance. There are indigenous peoples in the Climate Justice Alliance who believe in, because of sovereignty issues, in what they can get out of the COP. And I think my position may be a little different. And remember, I'm Puerto Rican. I'm a Puerto Rican of Black and indigenous ancestry, and I come from the oldest colony in the world. And so I have a very different position on the COP. But I think we're going to have to build consensus on how we're going to address it. And so for a while now, I've been talking about how do we boycott the COP? How do we pull out all of the global majority out of the COP so that we can see that the emperor's got no clothes? How do we make sure that the resources that go to send us to the COP, like in Egypt, you know, I thought about Egypt last year and I thought about what Mississippi was going through. And I thought that all of that shine, all of those resources should have been going to Mississippi, that we should identify different places in the United States that are enduring the impacts of extraction, and put the attention there and create a COP that really lifts the local narrative of the people that are most impacted. Remember that climate change is really the child of white supremacy. That's how we ended up in the place that we are right now. And so when we go, it reminds me of the civil rights movement, of how we had to move at the pace of accommodating the needs, the interests, and the vulnerability of the privileged in this country. And in that time period where that was happening, and that was a different time, and different decisions needed to be made, and we had only so much power at that time. At that time, what was being compromised was the lives of people. People were dying to make it easy for white folks to feel comfortable with the changes that were being operationalized. Now we're in this situation where we're not only dealing with houselessness, extreme policing, ICE raids, the rise of white supremacy, as what's happening in New York City Climate Week, where we're really having a march that was organized by a bunch of white guys who then just drop money in communities of color so that they can marginalize New York City frontline groups, right? And put us in the back of the climate bus, creating a situation of climate apartheid, because apparently not only is there a rise of white supremacy on the right, there's also a rise of white supremacy on the left. And so there are multi-dimensional threats that our organizations and our communities are dealing with right now. Everything from an orange sky dropping on us to extreme weather events like heat that are taking our people out. And while that's happening, we're dealing with the rise of white supremacy and people peddling false solutions, and they're doing it at the COP, right? Turning our communities into sacrifice zones. So we need to ask ourselves whether the COP serves us, and whether we are engaged in empire building or base building, whether we are allowing people to pick leaders for us, or whether we are agreeing to be matriarchal, leaderful, intergenerational, and walk in our power. Because when we go there, it reminds me of when I was in law school, and there was a professor who was very upset because there weren't any students of color in the room. And when one walked in, he was satisfied. It satisfied his liberal guilt. One was enough for him to be happy. And so if we all pulled out, if this was something that happened throughout the global South, we had events and activities happening everywhere, we would be able to walk in our power. The moment that a few people break rank and show up, what it does is it gives them the satisfaction, oh, here they are. Now they have, both in Egypt and what you're going to see in Abu Dhabi, and they have built in, just like all the community affairs or people who manage us for corporations, and the community affairs people who manage us for government, they've learned how to manage us. And so when you're there, you're in a small space and you're only speaking to the choir. We can no longer be insular in our communication with each other about the impact of the climate crisis. While we are fighting this fight, while we are exercising our rights as modern day warriors to fight on behalf of our people are working 2 or 3 jobs, taking care of 2 or 3 children, just really struggling, getting little bits of information. And it's really important that they be incorporated into decision making and understand their power, understand how to reclaim ancestral knowledge, and not have to depend on systems that have kept them in Yangotado, it's a Puerto Rican word, sorry, people, for generations, right? There is this fear that has been created to make us feel like we're not going to survive and that we can't thrive, and making us forget that we are actually an example of what is possible from people who came before us. So I wanna say that because I think we need to be fearless in boycotting the COP and calling for something different that draws attention to what is happening on the River Niger, what is happening in Brooklyn, what is happening on the West Coast in Indian country, what is happening in Maui, what is happening in Puerto Rico, what is happening in the Gulf South. And this global green economy that they keep peddling is just an economy with a green patina on it. The fact is that in terms of supply chain, in terms of who makes money, in terms of who they hire, in terms of who makes those decisions, that's not us. And so right now, many of us across the country are talking about the fact that the work isn't just aspirational, that is operational. And we are putting infrastructure on the ground. We're literally we're doing land use, zoning. We're doing all the things from putting infrastructure on the ground and focusing on things like renewable energy, drinkable water, food sovereignty, and wellness, the things that communities are telling us are priorities. We're doing those things with little resources. And we're doing it at a time when there's a lot of money on the table, and it is dividing our movement. It is totally creating empire builders, and people who were originally grassroots organizers and did this work want to model the capitalist, corporate, top-down, white-led infrastructure that put us in the position that we're in right now. Instead of thinking, oh my God, this is an opportunity to use this money and these resources to start base building and going deep and putting down legislation, putting down the infrastructure, building leadership, engaging in popular education, doing all the things that we need to do in this moment right now. That is like no other moment we've lived before, right? And so they have been co-opted into a system that is a replica of what put us here, except that they look like us. And so the COP brings in those people, and they love the selfies and they love showing up. But what we get in terms of what we deserve as a result of the history of enslavement and colonialism and extraction that has gotten us to where we are right now is very little. And so I would say that we need to work with each other, not compete with each other, collaborate with each other, and stop that. I don't know if there are children in the room, but stop that bullshit of that divisive stuff that we have been engaged in now over power, over money, over things that really are not serving our people. We are not honoring our ancestors. We are not honoring future generations unborn when we engage in the same kind of behavior that made it possible for us to be in the situation that we're in right now. We need to be able to break through that. And if we were to gather the global majority and say no, that will be felt all over the world. We have more power than we realize. And we need to be fearless about it. Honestly, I'm not somebody who comes from money. I come from struggle. I'm the first generation in my family to go to college, the first one. And look at what I'm doing, right? So the reason I'm telling you this is that I understand what it's like not to have things. I know what that's like to struggle and to have that fear of having things taken from you. But I think that collectively, we have power. Collectively, we won't burn out. Collectively, we'll be able to take care of each other. And it's unfair for a few people to have the courage to stand up while the other ones are basically collecting buco bucks and giving life to the rhetoric, but that rhetoric not being anything about what's happening on the ground. So when I think about the COP, I think about a place where compromises are made. And those compromises are literally who gets to live and who gets to die. And I don't think that we should be involved in making decisions about who gets to live and who gets to die. And those are the decisions that are being made at the COP. And you know who doesn't get to live or die in the COP? The corporations, the fossil fuel companies, the wealthy folks from the north that made this situation the situation that we now have to endure. And we're living it right now. This is not pie in the sky. We're living it from California all the way across the world. We are living the violent impact of a legacy of extraction and abuse of our people. And so I think we need to be bold. I think we need to be courageous. I think we need to be organized. And I think we need to be fearless. And we need to be able to work with each other and unlearn a lot of the things that we've learned. We need to decolonize power, and we need to be comfortable with shared leadership. We need to be leaderful, and we also need to be matriarchal, because that is a very different process of how we share power and how we build momentum and how we get our communities engaged in a meaningful way that is contrary to what we've learned from colonialism and from capitalism. So I'm so happy that I was invited to this conversation, because this is the conversation that I feel needs to be had right now. I'll stop.
No, you're good. My two sisters, Dr. McLean and Elizabeth, to let y'all go was like, I'm telling my head was like, be quiet, let them keep going. So thank you for that, Elizabeth. You said both of y'all said some very powerful stuff about this connection to white supremacy, not being empire building, you got to be base building. And it also says something about that money divide and conquer. And the people who divide and conquer, they're good. That's the game. So, that's the game that's been played. So we let the game play us, right? And also, we had a session. I'm not sure y'all saw the agenda. But we had a session, Elizabeth and Dr. McClain, this EJ Gold up in them hills. There's EJ Gold up in them hills, and about the extractive capitalism that's happening now, and it's around all this money that's out there, and how we need to be careful that we're not doing more extractive capitalism, racial capitalism, as you both just eloquently outlined. So I'm gonna pass the mic now to, is it Marinelle? So Marinelle's gonna speak now. I want to give you a few minutes to talk about your perspectives, your experiences, as a youth leader, organizing youth. We had a session today, a lunchtime session. We had youth working from Ben Franklin High School in Baltimore, working on incinerator, air quality issues in Curtis Bay area, and also youth with Central de Apoyo Familiar, talking about their work around education. They wrote a book about environmental justice issues that's on Amazon. So how are youth getting engaged in this movement, and from your experience? How can it be engaged, and what are some of the best practices that you kind of implemented in getting youth more engaged in climate justice?
Thank you so much, Doctor, for that question. Hi, everybody. I'm Marina Lobaldo. I am a climate justice advocate from the Philippines. And a little bit of my background, I actually started organizing in the Philippines when I was in sixth grade. So it was in 2012. I was organizing communities and schools about the basics of climate change, but these communities don't even have electricity. So these communities don't have access to information. They don't even get to use Facebook or anything like that. I've been working with communities, and I think the best practice that I've really learned is to really get consultation with the communities, involve them in every aspect of the project, from the very beginning of the consultation to the implementation and to the post implementation. Don't ever leave them behind. Because if you go to the communities, you will be surprised that there are a lot of climate solutions that are already happening. These communities know what are their problems, and these communities have the solution to that. They don't have the technical expertise sometimes, they don't have the funding for it sometimes. That is why it's not that sustainable. But they know what needs to be done. And that is not easy because I'm now here in the US studying my master's degree because I've been a poster child since Super Typhoon Haiyan happened and killed thousands of people in our province. Super Typhoon Haiyan is the strongest typhoon ever recorded in human history. It killed 30,000 plus of our people. From then on, I've been telling and telling my story to big conferences like COP, like Clinton Global Initiative and NYC that is happening right now, Climate Week and NYC that is happening right now, and a lot of big conferences. But I don't feel that I am actually part of the decision making. Every time I speak and share my story of how we survived Super Typhoon Haiyan and how we are adapting and mitigating to the effects of climate change, which is not even our fault, but we are losing our livelihood, we're losing our communities, we're losing the people that we love. Every time I share my story, I feel like people would just say, "Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, what can we do?" But actually not do anything. I always say, like, vote for the right leader, right? That is one thing that we can always do, is to vote for the leader that actually represents their people and will decide what's better for the environment, because we cannot mitigate, because our emission in the Philippines just drop in the ocean. We can't do anything. It's the US, the big countries, that has to lessen their emission so our people in the Philippines will not be dying. At this hour, people in my country are threatened by sea level rise. In 2050, I don't even know if my island will still be there. A few days ago, the Global Witness, they released a report that the Philippines is still one of the top countries to be top one of the deadliest country in the world to be an environmentalist. Before coming here in the US, before doing my master's degree, two of my friends died for being an environmentalist. I feel like I can do this panel now because I'm here in the US, but I will never be able to do this in the Philippines. Or else it will not just be me, but my family as well. So I would say, as best practice, for the leaders to actually go down to the communities and know them, work with them, not treat them as beneficiaries, but as partners, as key stakeholders. Because we cannot just go to the communities and say, these are the solutions to your problems. No, because these communities know what are the solutions to their problems. They need technical expertise to implement those solutions. They need funding and support to make sure that the solutions are sustainable. However we adapt, however we mitigate in the Philippines, if the US, for example, if China, if India will not lessen their emission, our people will continue to die because of the climate crisis. That is why we are now marching tomorrow. If you are in New York, let's march together to ask President Biden to end fossil fuel era, because there is no other way. We really have to make sure that our communities will not just suffer. That the next generation will live in a world that is free from harm, a world that they can live, a world that they can dream, and a world that they can hone their own potential. Thank you.
So you hear everybody, we're talking about, as the panelists have said, this is life and death. And she shared her friends lost their lives, right? So the privilege of being in the US to be an environmentalist, to be in this fight, where in some countries where people are being killed for their activism, right? So what are we gonna do? Go to the communities. What are we gonna do? Now I'm gonna go to our next speaker and talk about, your background. So you're coming on board from Morehouse School of Medicine, Dr. Miles Richardson. So you have this background in both human health and veterinary medicine. How do you envision, and Morehouse School of Medicine, y'all know, historically Black college, HBCU, just want to say that real quick. So how do you envision a conference of the people that's more inclusive, participatory, in response to the needs and aspirations of the most impacted communities? And what's the role of schools like Morehouse in this space? We had an HBCU session on Friday about the roles of HBCUs in the climate and environmental justice movement. So I'll pass the mic to you.
Thank you. Let me just start with wow. There's been a lot said here that we need to marinate with and on. My perspective, first of all, let me answer the question first, and then I'm back into my perspective. Anytime there is an organized structure where the structures that cause harm are in charge, it's not going to work. So cop is a cop out. And so conference of the people is really the only way. Now, let me tell you why I say that. My background, you mentioned veterinary medicine. I was talking with Molly in the back about that. And so my journey to public health and even to this environmental space comes from understanding and appreciating this planet, the nature, the animals, the people, the plants, all of that, sort of a closet hippie, if you will. But in that journey and discovering toxicology and environmental toxicology from an academic perspective as a veterinarian, when I got into federal work, I realized that the populations that were impacted disproportionately looked the same. They had the same bank account or lack thereof. They had the same no voice. It was the same pictures. That's really how I got into public health. Just recognizing that the science, the things that we do, all of us smart folks, excludes the beneficiaries, right? And so at Morehouse School of Medicine, I also direct public health, and we're a very community engaged program. We don't take funds from anybody unless they benefit the community or our students, period. So we're not for sale. That's an important concept. We got a lot of folks for sale, and we'll take the money and do anything. So when we talk to communities about, first of all, climate and environmental health, anything in that space, we first have to find out what their values are. We have to find out what their issues are, what their realities are, what their needs are. And what we find is that the MARTA bus stops too far from the house,
And so I can't take my groceries and my baby on the hip, right? And so we got to deal with the bus first before we talk about climate. And so where I'm going with that is that there are some proximate issues that have to do with just surviving before we can even move down the road to future. We're dealing with the right now. And so what we're doing, one of the things we're doing in the center that I direct is an effort looking at the knowledge, the attitudes, and the behaviors of our community partners in this space. Now, I can tell you what the answer is going to be. It's going to be we need a job. You know, we need education. We need some other things, but we need the data because in the space that I work in, we know that data can move things. So we need the data to be able to bring resources in to get those folks to a point where they can be healthy and whole. And then we can talk about the future. Now, let me go back to COP. I wasn't able to get here earlier. We had some convocation and events on campus this week. But I saw on September 13th, I think that was just a couple days ago, that there was a press release where the UN climate folks, climate action, and the Sustainable Development Goals folks got an expert panel together. You know, experts come together and they think really profoundly. And they profoundly thought that, hey, we should work together. And if you look at this, Google it, it's out there. There's a video that summarizes what the expert panel came up with. But basically, what they found is that, there is some overlap in the climate action plans and the sustainable development goals. And let me just read a couple. I have some of them here in front of me. I want you to, the sustainable development goals start with no poverty, right? Zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education. Those are the things that I got to talk to my community about before we can get to recycling or giving an energy efficient light bulbs. And electric cars are not even there. Where would they charge them if they could afford them? But if you look at this list of 17 sustainable development goals, I would say all but maybe 3 or 4 are directly related to climate. And the beauty of having the folks have this epiphany on the internet, you got to look at it. It's really amazing when people figure out something that we all know, and they've discovered it. But when you look at them, they are just profound. But what they're saying is what we know, and that is, first of all, we have to make people whole where they are. First of all, we have to build individuals which comprise communities. They have the same kind of issues. And then those community issues are driven by determinants of health, social determinants, political determinants, and so on. And the people who implement those things can't be in charge. It has to come from the bottom up. There has to be capacity building. There has to be resources. So the good news today is that some experts somewhere in the world woke up and thought we ought to work together. I'm encouraged because if we can end poverty, if we can feed people, if we can deal with proximate issues, then we can come together to deal with COP. But right now, COP is a cop out.
There you go. So I want to go back to our first 2 panelists. Again, a lot of profound things are said. I'm trying to take mental notes, y'all, and come up with some of these responses, some questions for you. To Dr. McLean, to Elizabeth, we're talking about these systems. I'm gonna slow down and say this right. So you have these racist systems that are out there. I'm gonna say this the way Elizabeth, the master's tools, right? The master's tools, and we're using those systems, those same racist systems, as it relates to COP. So let's kind of drill into that for both. I'm gonna go to Dr. McLean first and come back to Elizabeth. Talk again about some examples of how people have been doing it differently. I know you already talked about Climate Week and some other examples, but can you give us some examples of what we can do? What's your vision for taking Climate Week, taking this anti-COP or moving away from COP? So examples of what you've seen in the US and globally, digging into that, and what's your vision for what we should be doing next year, the next 5 years, the next 10 years? I'm gonna go to Dr. McLean first.
Ooh, That's a heavy question, brother, but I'm gonna do the best I can. First of all, we're just gonna continue what we're doing. We are, as Elizabeth said, we're warriors on the ground. And we don't take no stuff from nobody. And we are continuing to organize, as Dr. Richardson said, we are trying to respond to the immediate needs of our communities. We're listening to the voice of our communities. We are training our communities. We are working with our communities. We're responding to our communities. We are engaging our young people, and we are taking our own plan in our hands. I think that all of these summits that we go to, including COP, they do use up a lot of our resources that can be used to do our work on the ground. For example, we spent about probably close to $70,000 last year trying to get 16 community leaders to the COP27 process. And it was a heck of a lot of fundraising and begging and pleading. And we could have taken that $70,000 and built a resiliency hub in Ipswich, Georgia, which really needs it. And we would have provided and addressed some of the needs that those folks have, and they would then be new boots on the ground taking care of their own community because their capacity would have been developed by resources placed at their disposal. We can't keep doing the same old thing, same old thing. One of the things we're going to have to do, and this is real tough, is that we're going to have to call out those people who are taking off. I'm trying to be kind of diplomatic because I don't want nobody to get mad with me. I'm tired of that. We got to call out these EJ pimps, EJ con folk who are getting all of these resources and becoming the most prestigious this and the most prestigious that and the influential this and the influential that. And we're writing the books and the position papers and flying all over the planet. When people right in Savannah, where I live, cannot pay their light bill, they cannot get the medicine, and a lot of times it's a choice between one or the other. They cannot access edible, nutritious food. And like Dr. Richardson said, if I can't help with that, they don't want to hear about no climate reality, even though they know that they've been living in a flood zone for the past 40 years. So we've got to do much more on the ground, aggressive work with community. And I don't necessarily need to be in New York. I need to be in Savannah. That's where I live. Most of us as leaders, we spend a lot of time on planes, going to conferences to speak, convenings to run workshops. And so my people are telling me, we need you to stay home. We need you to be right here with us on the ground day in and day out. Yes, there's some people who need to be in DC. There may be some people that need to be in the international arena, but we have to take care of home first. We have to make sure that where we live, people are getting what they need. And so when we go to them to ask them to engage in anything, they are there because we are already family. We're already moving in the same direction. We're already working together. So building that collective work and being responsible and not allowing national hand-picked leaders, not allowing hand-picked organizations to represent us or to go struggle for us. We have to do that for ourselves. As I said earlier, we have to continue to engage in the concept of Kujichagulia, self-determination. And we've got to confront and not be afraid to really battle racism as it is manifested in all ways. In Savannah, we're not just dealing with environmental racism. We're dealing with age-old white supremacist notions, attitudes, behaviors, and the associated Uncle Tom, Uncle Thomasinus, Aunt Thomasinus that go along with that buy into their program. That is very difficult. It's serious for us because with those people standing in the gap, working with the oppressor, it gets to be really, really, really hard to push any agenda in your city council, your county commission, your state legislature, all those people who are saying they're putting in policies to protect you. We have to have our alternatives, and we have to begin to talk about this whole issue of sovereignty, this whole issue of reparations. We need reparations, Dr. Wilson. I thought Justice 40 initiatives coming out of the White House meant that I was getting my 40 acres and a tractor, maybe a mule, but I thought it had that kind of reparation, 40 acres, that's what I'm thinking. And I didn't realize that it was 40% of some investments after the it's not a reality, but yet you find our people pushing it, doing trainings with it. And yes, there's a lot of money on the table and we should get some of it, but it should not be our priority. It's not should be our priority. And we don't have to beg for that money because guess what? That is our money. We pay taxes.
Yes, ma'am.
All kind of taxes. All kind of taxes.
It's the
Sales
people's
tax,
money.
tax on your car, your house, your head, your this, that, the other, and the third. So how do we reclaim those resources in such a way that we're moving as a people? We're moving as a people in our community. We're moving as a people in this country. And in, as Sister Elizabeth said, mobilizing the global majority. We got to stop thinking that we are the minority. We got to stop begging. Oh, you need this. No, we're going to take it. The Black Panther Party showed us how to do it. So we have examples how to move our community, how to serve our community, how to use the power that we have. We don't have to be empowered. I can't stand that word because we already have the power. So we need to continue to use that power to work with our people to do the things that we need to do without always garnering resources to go to the meetings and the conferences and everything. Before we got on, Sister Elizabeth and I was talking about the use of the digital platforms. And while we think that sometimes they're a little bit too much, they do allow us to meet with each other and plan with each other and work with each other without having to leave our homes. And that's the good part of it, because too much of us is going out and not enough staying in. There's a whole generation of young people in Savannah. I keep going back to Savannah because I'm kind of a girl that thinks and acts locally while I'm still working globally. But there are so many young people who are still disenfranchised, that are still marginalized, that still are not even interested in climate reality, climate justice. They don't care what you call it because they are on the street homeless. They're suffering from sleep deprivation. That's why they be acting out, because they haven't had a good night's sleep. So how do we provide for the basic needs of our people while mobilizing them to address these serious issues? But we are calling for a people's COP. That's different from a summit. I think it might be a little bit, but a gathering where we're putting the minds that you have on this panel to work, to come up with that cohesive plan and a way to hold each other accountable. We talk about the 17 environmental justice principles and how they relate to the climate movement. I don't think very many people even know what the 17 principles are and how they relate to the movement right now. So how do we become environmental justice warriors? How do we become those climate change folks who really are making sure that change happens on the ground is where we need to go?
Thank you for that. Let's go to Elizabeth. Your thoughts.
Sure. So first, I want to say that the challenge exists right here in this panel. There are inconsistencies, and not inconsistencies, but differences of opinion, even on this panel. So we talked about solidarity, and we talked about how things move at the speed of comfort for the privileged. And so building alignment on issues comes from getting to the point where the privileged are comfortable. And there are consequences for our communities. I talked about the march and how the march is offensive to frontline organizations in New York City that were marginalized by white leadership who organized the climate march in New York City. And I mentioned that because we're talking about solidarity and deep solidarity. As a Puerto Rican, I have deep solidarity for the Philippines. Similar history. We don't just share Bruno Mars. We also share the fact that we were invaded by Spain, colonized by Spain, that we're island nations, that we've lost thousands of lives to climate change. And so when I use my platform, I use it to support and lift all of our peoples and never just talk about ours. And I would never go to an event or support or lift an event that is disrespecting the front line and the people who live, struggle, and try to survive in the place where that event is happening. The Hermes principles tell you that you need to check before, that they have to be involved in the planning, and that is something that power has to be shared. And we are no longer in that headspace where we think that white folks know more than us, that they care more about our communities than us. If they want to be allies, have to roll with us. They can't be missionaries and they can't be making decisions for us anymore. So I want to say that those inconsistencies exist even here in the conversation that is happening in terms of the things that we're doing and also in terms of what our communities are going through. Remember that climate change is going to exacerbate poverty. It's going to exacerbate homelessness. It's going to exacerbate policing. It's going to exacerbate every single ism and every single condition that exists in our communities that comes from a legacy of white supremacy will be exacerbated by climate change. And so our responsibility is to make the connection between those conditions that our communities are, and the impact of climate change, because we need to work to strengthen social cohesion so that our people survive the violent impact of recurrent extreme weather events. What are we doing in Sunset Park? Well, we've doubled the amount of open space. We've stopped the siting of power plants. We've helped pass the most aggressive climate legislation in the country, the CLCPA. We are launching the first community-owned solar initiative for 200 families to build community wealth in Sunset Park. We have mapped 20 rooftops for community-owned solar. We have put out a plan called The Grid that is about decarbonizing the entire neighborhood. And it has been supported by everyone from elected officials, and it comes out of over 10 years of community-based planning. We have organized 8 climate justice youth summits where young people of color are leading and have been an integral part of decision-making within the climate justice movement. We are decommissioning peaker plants. That infrastructure that is polluting and causes asthma, upper respiratory disease. We have mapped toxic exposure in our community. We have created plans that will make it possible for our communities to be connected to each other around the issues of renewable energy, food sovereignty, wellness, and drinkable water, the things that people in our community have told us are really, really important to them. So we are completely solution oriented, from building leadership to putting infrastructure on the ground to passing policy and making sure that there are laws that move the money to the front line. We have, in the environmental justice sense, fought against and won proposals that would increase toxic exposure in our community. And then we are forward thinking and looking at how we can use land use and policy and zoning and science and architecture and engineering to design a community where our communities are able to thrive in the face of climate change. We have looked at the industrial waterfront, and instead of throwing it out, talked about industrial retention and how we create a green reindustrialization where we have green manufacturing. We're working with offshore wind to make sure that these companies that are coming from Europe are centering a just transition, and that the supply chain, the MWBEs, the training is done in such a way that we are building a pathway of jobs that is long-term and not just entry-level like typical workforce development folks have historically done. We have created a system of co-governance where we meet with our elected officials, because many of our election officials run on health, on social services, on elder rights, on all the things that drive them to run. That's the historical place that our people run on and introduce them to how they think about offshore wind and how they can understand that ecosystem and renewable energy. They are being exposed to what energy democracy is, so that from their platform, whether they're a city council member, an assembly member, or a congressional representative, they know how to use that platform to advance climate justice. So on every level, we are not intersectional, we are multidimensional, and we're doing all those things so that, and we are also collecting the knowledge so that we can share it with other people so that they can jump with it, right? So because we need to be able to help other folks that are not in the same position to build their capacity, because I care about every other organization and community that is similarly situated. So we are trying to create replicable models that other people can benefit. We are in an industrial waterfront community, the largest significant maritime industrial area in New York City. So we've been very successful in doing all those things. And while we're doing those things, we're also having to fight white supremacy and all these movements and people coming into our communities and trying to marginalize us and put us in the back of the climate bus with solutions, by the way, that turn our communities into sacrifice zones. In 2014, people of color, Black and Indigenous people, because remember, nationality is a creation of colonialism, right? We were at the forefront of organizing that march. And I guess a lot of us became a little bit too successful. And so we have been elbowed to the back of the bus in New York City. That is not the way you come into any neighborhood. You don't go in, I wouldn't go to Savannah and disrespect the people of Savannah in that way. I would call and say, hey, what do you think of this idea? If you don't agree, we won't do it. Does this complement the work that you're doing instead of supplant it? Does this elevate the work that you were doing instead of us taking credit for it and compete for it? Those are the questions that when we build solidarity, we need to have with each other. And we can't engage in oppression Olympics, because the truth is that Hurricane Katrina took out a lot of people. Hurricane Maria, Hurricane Andrew, all of these extreme weather events are literally killing thousands of our people. And that doesn't even count the legacy of our people who have died as a result of toxic exposure. My family, I grew up, I was born and raised in an EJ community during COVID, lost 4 cousins in 2 weeks, right? I almost went into cardiac arrest and I lost my mother right after. We literally, and I have had a bilateral pulmonary embolism that almost killed me. So I share that because we were born and raised in these places that we fight for our aunties, for our uncles, for the future of our children. And so it feels very personal. And so I think also that this work has been professionalized, and there is this disconnect between what happens in offices and places of academia and then what happens on the ground. The truth is that those of us on the ground are unbelievably resourceful and freaking brilliant. We're dealing with science, engineering, all of the things that are necessary for our people to be able to thrive. And we're creating strategic partnerships with those folks that are aligned with us. And so we can't allow these systems and the way that we're educated to silo the way that we think about complex problems.
No,
I think
Elizabeth.
of Audre Lorde. So I'll stop right there. Sorry, I went out too long.
No, you're good. No, I wish we had more time.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. I know you're gonna go more, but you gave a lot to the audience and those who are in the room and who are listening. And I appreciate you telling that story, because EJ is personal, right? And as Dr. McLean said, you got to work on your home, and you talked about how you worked on your own house, right? And how that's part of the way we need to do this work. But she said something very powerful about we got to grapple together to have solidarity and make sure people are not supplanting those who've been doing the work, leading the work. And that was been a part of the discussion that we've had during the symposium, everybody. And I'm just going to harken back to our discussion about reparations, also a discussion about EJ goes up in them hills that we had, Elizabeth, the other day. So I thank you for that. Now, we did start a little bit late. I'm not sure how long y'all can stay on. We had about 8 minutes to the hour. So I do want to give our panelists that are in person some time to respond to their vision for how we can move forward, and then have some closing thoughts. Because I'm not sure how much longer y'all can stay on. Now it looks like we have our our last speaker, but I'm not sure how much time we want to continue with the session. But y'all let me know if y'all can go a little bit past 6. So y'all can go a little bit past 6.
Dr. Wilson, this is Dr. McLean. I cannot go beyond that time, the time that we have spent already. I really appreciate you giving me an opportunity to share, but I'm at my limit.
Okay, cool. So I'll go to our panelists here, and then maybe give last. What would you, Bernice? What you saying from the audience? I heard some from the audience. Yeah, well, we were supposed to end at 5:45, so just want to share that. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and let the panelists on the stage give some maybe last words, if that's fine with y'all. Last words, and then go to our fifth panelist who joined us. Introduce yourself and give you a last word. I'm sorry you weren't able to join us sooner, but let's go ahead, Marinelle.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank our speakers online, and also just want to say that I didn't intend to offend anyone, and I'm sorry for not being sensitive about the organizations in NYC. I just want to also to say that in the Philippines, we are not having this kind of platforms. So as much as possible, we maximize the platforms that are given to us, because however we adapt, however we mitigate, our people are still dying, our communities are still sinking. If we will not maximize these opportunities for us to actually put there our key messages, you would not know what are the stories of the Philippines. You would not hear these kinds of stories. We don't have the luxury of choice. And so I am very pleased to be here, to be able to say this story and to share with you what's happening in the Philippines. And I will still go to the march, and I'm sorry about that. I'm really in solidarity with all the organizations, and I'm sorry about the complications with the communities also in New York. This is something that we don't know about, and this is something that we would really want to know about events that are happening. Again, climate events are not perfect. And there are events that we don't have a choice but just to maximize it, because we're not even given the opportunity sometimes. We don't even given the platform sometimes. And thank you for being here. Thank you for inviting me to be here. Thank you for giving me the space to share the story of the Philippines. And I hope we can still collaborate together, because we are just in one world. We are all connected. Whatever you're doing here in the US, we are bearing the brunt of it in the Philippines. And however we do adopt again in the Philippines, our communities are still sinking. My culture is still dying. My traditions are still dying. I don't know if I go back to the Philippines and see the shores that I've been playing with when I was 2 years old. Those are the things that I want my children to see. Those are the kind of memories with the nature, with the beaches, with the mountains that my children want for my children to enjoy. And I just want to end with saying that I'm here as a climate justice activist, as a youth. I'm just 26 years old, and I still have a lot of things I want to do in this lifetime. My only hope for the future is for me and the next generation, to live in a world where it is safe for me to dream, it is safe for me to live, and it is safe for me to hone my own potential and become the best person that I can be. And I will not just be surviving another typhoon, and I will not just be surviving another tragedy. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Dr. Miles Richardson.
Let me just say this. Raise your hand if you remember a time when either you or your parents or your grandparents or your aunties or anybody sat at the kitchen table. So y'all know what I'm talking about, sitting at the kitchen table. Depending on your age, you may not have been invited, but but you know that back in the day, business was tended to at the kitchen table. Problems were solved, conversations were had, honest conversations were had. Extended family just went through the back door and sat at the kitchen table. Some people couldn't come to the table. I think that when we think about climate justice, environmental justice, public health is my lens, community health. We got to get more folk at the kitchen table. I think that the challenge is that the top-down approach that we often have, it just doesn't work. The folks who are impacted know what needs to be done. They know what the proximate issues are. And so we have to create an opportunity to bring everybody to the table. And so there has to be conveners. There have to be conveners who can do that. We that's one of our focus areas in our new center, the Center of Excellence on Climate and Environmental Health at Morehouse School of Medicine is new. We are being pushed to do some stuff and get some money, and we standing back and saying, whoa, wait a minute. We need to know what the community says, because they're actually the experts. We just act like the experts. And if we're smart, we act like it in the back room and put them, allow them to be in the front. So I think it's really about bringing folk to the community, to the table. We have some community academic partners. They sit on all of our governance committees. They sit on my curriculum committee. I tell them, I don't want to teach public health students anything that's not vetted through your reality, because they are learning to serve you. So I'll just leave the kitchen table analogy. Just remember, the table still works, y'all. We got to get back. We got not the countertop, not the little countertop. You don't have enough room. Can't bring everybody around, but the kitchen table. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. And it speaks to the seriousness of the issues that have been discussed there, and the issues of making sure all our folks who are being impacted by climate injustices, that they get to that kitchen table. And that kitchen table is driving the work, right? That's the people's COP that we're talking about. So we have our, looks like a fifth speaker who's here. And I know we don't have a lot of time. So can you give Carolina Ballesteros, if I mispronounced it, please, you can say when you introduce yourself. I want you to close us out, with a more of the indigenous perspective on what's the vision for a different COP. What's your vision for a people's COP? A COP that speaks to, that's driven by indigenous peoples who are impacted by climate justice issues. Go ahead. Oh, you're on mute. You have to unmute.
Thank you. Thank you for this invitation. I'm Carolina Ballesteros. I'm from Panama. I'm working with indigenous communities and Afro communities in Panama country, especially the ones that are being more affected are going to be or start getting affected by the climate change. And following up on your question, we actually are implementing a program, a plan, in which we are trying to, I really like what you guys said, because yes, it's real that the climate change is going to affect us very hard in the future. But the reality is that at this moment, they have no senses to think on future if they are hungry, if they don't know what to do, if they just don't know. And they need a lot of help, and we are working on that, on a plan that we create with the census of the 2030 program. We're trying to bring them the most innovative tools, partner with international associations from different parts of the world. Based that we are in the middle of Latin America, we are creating this pilot plan with the indigenous communities, because they have a lot of needs, medical, living, and a lot of needs they have, even before the relocation of some of them that are going to be affected because they are living in islands that are going to be really affected with the climate change in the future. So we are trying to always work and group together with partners and with people as you that are very involved in this, and that can help us to help others to be safe and have a better life quality with the same union that we're supposed to have all together.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Appreciate you joining us and closing this session out. Sorry you weren't able to be here longer, but you've heard today about the vision from everyone on the panel about how we should work together this kitchen table, how we need to make sure we're fighting against white supremacy, how we make sure we need to focus on home, how we make sure we use different systems to really create a different COP, a people's COP, a COP that's inclusive, but driven by the global majority. We're not the minority, right? We have power, and you heard Dr. McLean say she's tired of the word empowerment with an EM, but you know in this symposium, we talk about empowerment with an IN, right? The power we already have. So I want to thank our panelists again for joining us. Let's give them another round of applause, please. And it really sets us up for, I think, our future symposium. So IT team, I want to thank you, Karen, for joining us. I want to go to the slides again, please. I'm going to close this out because Vernice said we should get you out on time. But I was trying to Vernice, y'all was talking too long upstairs. Extra 25 minutes. And I came in, y'all still kept talking. I'm like, okay. So we had a great 5 days, I believe, with this people, power, and politics. That was the theme. So just to recap, y'all, we had Reverend Bishop Barber, who started us out. We had sessions on Monday that really talked about energy justice, environmental justice, climate justice, national, internationally, right? We closed that day out with a rousing session with NAACP. Second day, we had Robin Morris Collins, who did her keynote speech to talk about, environmental justice issues and how we need to work together and how we can, she said we don't have a capacity issue, we have an access issue. I think we have both, but she made a really good point. We need to get more access to folks. We talked about how we need to clasp hands. John Lewis's book, Clasp Hands Together. This discussion today, how we need to clasp hands together as these winds blow to make sure we're moving forward in solidarity, right? We also had Justin Pearson. He said, when you're doing EJ work, y'all, he said, you got to be all in. You need rest. You need to get your rest in, but you got to be all in. And he talked about the intersectionality of all these issues. Fight against gun violence, that's an EJ issue. He said that, right? But also climate change is the EJ issue. And we went into we had a session on reparations with Brother Mustafa Ali, a conversation about reparations. And then, our Thursday, and we had a session on EJ Gold Up in them Hills. Racial capitalism, extractive capitalism. There's a lot of money out there right now, as we just talked about. But how is that money getting to the people? It's the people's money, right? Say it, y'all. It's the people's money. It's the people's money, right? It's people's money. Then we got into Thursday to Saturday, more of a regional focus on the Mid-Atlantic. Lots of sessions around the Tharva Communities Technical Assistance Center and how we can work together in the Mid-Atlantic region to address EJ issues. So, and we closed out really moving to what is the future of this work and how we can not just, work locally, but work globally, but do that better together in solidarity in this conversation we just had. So I want to thank all our sponsors. I'm not going to restate all of them, but I want to thank all our sponsors. I want to thank the team, the staff who helped organize this symposium. And so team, stand up wherever you are, if you're in the room, any of the staff, any of the PhD students, anybody who have organized. So Melissa, I see you in the room. Vivek, I see you in the room. Blaine, I see you in the room. Who is that? Eli? I say stand up, stretch out a little bit. Thank all the staff. Shawnice, who helped, who did a lot of lead work. Pamela did a lot of lead work. She was still doing work, logistic work while she's sick. Pamela's a trooper, and so she was able to be here. We also want to thank Marlena, thank Paul, Dr. Kavanaugh, thank Bacola and Holly, who did a lot of the work as well on the GS workshops. Eli helped with IT. Thank Lakeem, who came in to help with IT too. He was great. Also thank our volunteers who supported this work. This is very exciting to see everybody here and making this 9th symposium a rousing success. Let me go to this last slide, because I know as a Vernice, I need to hurry up and get y'all to your food. Now, the reception is going to be here. So we just had a snack a little bit earlier. I'm feeding y'all well. Y'all know this symposium is free, right? Y'all had to pay for anything. You had to pay for a train to get here. Maybe, hopefully, you pay for your solar powered car. We have those yet? We'll have those in the next symposium. I want to thank the School of Public Health, University of Maryland, for their support. And I want to do something I needed to do last year. I want to show y'all the save the date, Vernice. So to make sure we don't have no other events during the week of the symposium, y'all see it, y'all take a picture of it. The 10th symposium, the 10th annual, semi-annual siege, you see a siege environmental justice and health space symposium will be September 9th. All y'all write this down and tell your friends, tell them who's organizing any events. We already got this week on lock, okay? September 9th through the 14th, not 2023, 2024. Y'all got it, y'all take a picture. I want to see everybody take a picture. Because I want to have any confusion about everybody trying to put some event at 8 p.m. on Tuesday, or 2 days of great women leaders meeting. I'm being bad. Meeting, you know, that's great. I want us to coordinate, which is how you say that word, coordinate better. But I thank everyone here for being participatory. You know, again, we talk about environmental justice. It's about the people, right? Think about these issues. We talk about the spirit of EJ. It's about the people. You know, it's about love, right? I'm getting excited. Y'all know what I'm about to do? Who called me the bootleg? Did Dr. Klein call me a bootleg minister? I call myself a bootleg preacher. I prefer research minister. Research minister. But bootleg preachers, like I'm got to drink something before I come talk to my people. Got to get some spirits before I get into the spirit, right? So I just want to show appreciation for everyone who showed up virtually, you know, day 1, day 2, who showed up in person on Thursday and then got confused and said, we in person on Friday. Now, y'all, they had a football game. Looked like they won too, but I didn't watch the game. I was busy focused on y'all, right? And who showed up today. So you showed up about the people. EJ is about the people. Climate justice is about the people. Energy justice is about the people. So in the words of Bernice, she said, "I need to hurry up and be quiet." So thank you again. Y'all give yourself a round of applause. And please, let's enjoy the reception. And next year again, everybody, y'all read that again. 10th annual, September 9th to the 14th. That's to say the date. Share with your friends. Y'all have a good night. Thank you. Thank